Hey everybody, I'm Jamie Daggers. Welcome to The Process. Today we're going to be talking about Wonderland's War. It's a game full of beautiful miniatures of all different shapes and sizes, some character models, some castles, even a first player token, and they're all different shapes, all different sizes, and interesting, characteristics. And today, I'd like to talk about how to paint those in an approachable way. So what is The Process? The Process is a series that I'm developing right now in front of you, wherein I teach people who maybe enjoy board games or enjoy miniatures, but in a more casual sense, and don't necessarily want to become full-time hobbyist mini painters. So what are some of the key ideas of The Process? I'd like to keep things accessible. So we're keeping cost low, we're keeping techniques minimal, and we're keeping things simple as far as colors and color options go. I want it to be something that's approachable from any angle, from any age, from any skill level, so that even if you're not somebody who's a mini painter, you can still have painted minis in your board game. So today we're talking about Wonderland's War. And in this video, I painted the Jabberwock. Now the Jabberwock is kind of a large model, but looks can be deceiving. Sometimes larger models are easier to paint, even though they seem a little bit more intimidating. The Jabberwock has a lot of soft features and rounded areas that are going to be really easy to highlight. And due to this, it's going to make the effort that we have to expend on this a lot lower. The commitment of colors can also be really limited. It's only green tones and some purples, browns, and grays for the base, and you're pretty much scot-free. So without further ado, I'd like to jump into the process of how I painted this Jabberwock. So for step one, we're going to base coat green all over this model. We're going to try to avoid the base, since that seems to be made out of some other organic material like rock and wood. It'll just save us some time later if we avoid painting that with another color. In this case, I'm using a color called Forest Troll Green from Cuttlefish Colors. Now you'll notice as I paint, this model has what's called a zenithal highlight. Now don't be discouraged by a big word like zenithal. It is a technique that has been kind of utilized a lot lately in the miniature space. All it really is a primer, a black primer in this case, followed by successive lighter layers of gray and white. All this does is it establishes some consistent lighting across the model and saves you time in the long run. The idea being in this case that when we put transparent paint over top of this pre-existing lighting, it makes it so much easier because the transparent paint will take on the qualities of light that have already been established on the mini. Now, if I've lost you there, don't worry about it. We'll just keep going. Putting green on the model is going to be plenty to start. So the next step is going to be base coating brown on the base. This part we're paying close attention to the tree that the Jabberwock is standing on as it wraps underneath his belly into the rock of the rest of the base. And if you overpaint onto the rock, that's not a big deal. Most of the paints we're using today are going to be fully opaque, so one coat should cover any other color that's going to be on the model. So don't worry about being too neat with this step. It'll all be okay. To paint this tree, we're going to use a 50-50 mix of water and whatever brown color we have. Thinning paints is always the key to keeping things smooth and avoid having these really thick layers of paint. It also means that the paint is going to dry a little bit slower, but it's going to dry a lot smoother. So when you're using your paint, whatever brand it may be, just make sure that the paint flows easily off of your brush and doesn't do what I call plowing. When you push a shovel through the snow, it piles up on either side. In the same way, if you have paint that's too thick on your brush, when you push the brush across the mini, you'll notice piles of paint that are on either side of the brush stroke. That's usually a good indicator that you'll need to thin your paint a little bit more. In this case, the 50-50 water and brown paint mix will go onto the tree. For the tree, I've used a color called Graveyard Grim from Cuttlefish Colors. Step 3 will be base coating gray on the rock area of the base. As I mentioned before, the tree is growing out of the rock, so there's going to be a bit of confusion where maybe these two elements meet. Don't worry too much about that. It's underneath the model, so hardly any people will be seeing that. As long as it looks relatively neat, I don't think anybody will notice the difference, and I certainly wouldn't worry about it if I were you. In this case, I used a color called Dark Warm Gray from Pro Acryl. For step 4, we're going to base coat green on the wings, and we're going to highlight focal points on the face. In this case, I've used the color green from Pro Acryl. Since these areas of the model are much higher, they are closer to our light source. If you imagine the light shining from a 12 o'clock position or a noonday sun, the things that are the most elevated will be inevitably the things that receive the most lighting. So in this case, I want to make sure that the color on the face, which is going to be the point that everybody's going to be looking at, and then the colors on the wings are going to be the most prominent, especially since they are some of the most prominent features of this mini. Using the green to highlight specifically the tops of the wings, avoiding the membranes when possible, we will be going back to paint those later. As for the face, we're going to use that green to highlight sections of the nose, the bottom of the chin, the forehead, and the ears. We want to pay attention to the tops of those features, as I mentioned. If you imagine each of those features as a sphere, you will want to coat the top 50% of that sphere with those highlights. As we add more highlights to this mini, you're going to find that some of these areas may be a little bit harder to reach, and that's okay. My best suggestion is to move the mini, not the brush. Instead of trying to move your brush into these hard to reach places, don't be afraid to flip the mini upside down or turn it in different angles so that your access point is a little bit simpler. You'll avoid overpainting and hitting areas that you've already painstakingly painted. So step 5, we're going to use a technique called dry brushing. If you don't know what dry brushing is, I'd like to point you towards this YouTube short I have demonstrating how to accomplish that technique. In this case, we're dry brushing purple onto different areas of this model. In this case, I used the color purple from Pro Acryl. I'm paying special attention, again, to areas that are on the top of the model. For example, where his leg meets his hip, it's a sort of raised area that's on the outside of the profile of the mini, so it's an area that would capture light. It's not covered by any other materials, such as the wings or any other part of his body, and this purple is going to add a nice color contrast to the mini that's going to make it really look great on the table. The beauty of dry brushing is that it can add a lot to a model without a whole lot of effort. And once you start to get the hang of that dry brushing, you'll start to realize how applicable that technique can be in so many different situations. It's really a great level up for your painting techniques. For step 6, we're going to mix the colors green and yellow. We're going to use it to highlight the membranes on the wings, as I mentioned earlier. So the area between the tips of the wings are going to receive this extra light green just to have them stand out a little bit from the actual musculature of the wings. In this case, I've used green and golden yellow from Pro Acryl, but feel free to use any brand you like. For step 7, we're going to take a little bit of that same color, the 50-50 mix, and we're going to dot the eyes. A lot of people like to hold their breath when they're dotting eyes for fear of spreading the paint all over the place. If you find that you're having a hard time keeping your hands steady while you're dotting the eyes, I would recommend taking both heels of your palms and putting them together. I use this in almost every step of painting. It helps keep your hands steady, your brush strokes smooth, and it keeps everything from shaking all over the place as you paint. I find that even people with a bit of a shakier disposition find this technique to steady everything really, really nicely. One final touch to putting your palms together is steadying your hands by putting your elbows on the table. Once you have that tripod of support between your hands touching, your elbows on the table, you'll find that any shakiness that you might have when painting goes away immediately. For step 8, we're going to do some more precision work by putting red in the mouth of the Jabberwock. In this case, I've used the color red from Pro Acryl, and we're just going to take a small, careful approach to coat the tongue and the edges of the mouth. For step 9, we're going to go back to that gray and paint it onto the teeth, paying special attention to not hit any areas that we just coated with red. This one requires a little bit more precision, so if you're finding it difficult, I would recommend using the same technique we used to dot the eyes. In this case, I've used bright warm gray from Pro Acryl. For step 10, we're going to mix paint again. In this case, we're mixing gray with black and yellow. What this does is it creates kind of a bone color that we're going to use to paint onto the horns on either side of the face. If you'd like to get really fancy, you can just keep adding yellow to that mixture and highlighting the upper parts of the horns to really draw out that detail. Again, using the face as a focal point, the horns on either side will almost point to the face, which draws the eye inward and makes it look much more impressive. For this step, I've used yellow, bright warm gray, and coal black, all from Pro Acryl. For step 11, we're going to take the gray and the yellow from step 10, and we're going to do a 50-50 mix with those as well. We're going to take this 50-50 mix and paint it onto the upper parts of the horns. In this case, you want to pay special attention to not get it on the lower 50% of the horns. And what this will do is it'll create this nice highlight that's close enough to the color we already painted on there, but brighter, and the horns already frame the face. So it's going to draw the eye inward to that hard work that you did on the mouth and the eyes and the highlighting on the face. For step 12, we're going to add a bit of a brightness to the eyes by dotting them with bright warm gray from Pro Acryl. Even though we've already painted the eyes yellow, this little dot of white will create what's called an ocular highlight, which is a small reflective dot that really brings life to the eyes of your mini. It adds so much vitality to the face of your minis and can really be an impressive step that moves you forward in your painting journey. Step 13 is more of a bonus step. It's certainly not necessary to complete this mini. You've already crossed the finish line. This is your victory lap. I've taken an orange and gone around the mini to find the little warts that are all over different parts of his hindquarters and certain parts of his back. I've added the orange in small highlight layers, just like we did with the face. And in this case, I used terracotta from Huge Miniatures. Thank you for joining me on the inaugural journey of the process. This is a very new series, so it would do me a huge favor if you were to go down and like, subscribe, and even leave a comment below. If you found this helpful, I would love to know what other games you would like to see me cover. It just gives me a great opportunity to approach publishers and offer this service when other people are already asking for it. In the description below, you'll find a link that goes to a list of products that I highly recommend. Now, full disclosure, these are affiliate codes that do give me a little bit of support when you shop with them, but I also don't recommend any products that I also don't personally use. The reason that most of these are on there is because I use them every single day. I think they're great values and they're excellent products. So thanks again for coming along this journey with me to look at some Wonderland's War minis. There will be a few other videos in this series, so I hope you'll look forward to them. Again, if you would like to support the channel, please like, subscribe, comment, share with your friends, and keep painting. Again, the process is intended to be inexpensive, approachable, and low impact from a technical standpoint. I want this to be easy for you because painting can truly be a relaxing and enjoyable hobby, kind of a way to turn off your brain in an otherwise super connected and fast-paced lifestyle that we all lead. I hope you find some joy in painting these minis, and even more joy when you play with your friends and they get to look at the hard work that you've done. As always, you can join my Discord, catch one of my streams sometime. I'm live every day from Monday through Friday from 1 p.m. until 4 p.m. Eastern Time. I'm always answering questions about painting, so if you walk away from this video thinking, I've got no idea what I'm doing, stop on in on a stream. So join me over at daggers.tv, again, Monday through Friday, 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Time, where I can answer any of your painting questions. Thank you again for joining me today. My name is Jamie Daggers, and don't forget, if you can't trust yourself, you can trust the process.